With Wuthering Waves' first anniversary comes our newest resonator, Zani. And while her kit may look confusing, we're going to break it down so the only ones left frazzled are your enemies. In this video, we'll be going over Zani's kit, rotation, echoes, weapon options, team options, talent priority, and sequences. I'll also include my overall opinion at the end, along with the free-to-play tower run. This video is based on my own calculations and theoretical analysis. Actual gameplay will likely differ due to in-game variables, updates, rotations, and individual playstyles. Zani's kit, while reading like a massive wall of text, is actually pretty straightforward. Zani's basic attacks are pretty standard, although if you time her basic 3 correctly, she can do an extra hit that generates a surprisingly high amount of forte energy. Her resonant skill does a bit of damage and if timed right, blocks the oncoming attack and performs Pinpoint Strike. Pinpoint Strike also does a bit of vibration damage. If you do a basic attack after pressing your skill, you'll do a basic attack stage 3. The basic stage 3 after skill also allows you to generate forte a bit more quickly. Once you build your forte circuit, you can do an enhanced skill that can actually counter grapples and can be held to block a bit longer. This even works on the grab that Hecate does in her stage 2 hologram. This probably works against other enemies like Morning Ikes, but I haven't got a chance to test all the various holograms yet. Before we can go over Zani's Liberation and Forte circuit, we need to go over her Forte circuit mechanic, Heliacal Ember. I've covered most of this in my previous video, but Zani requires a character to apply Spectral Frazzle to the enemies that she will convert into Heliacal Embers. This causes the Spectral Frazzle damage to, instead of doing damage over time, does damage all at once. When this conversion happens, each time you convert a stack of Spectral Frazzle, she also gets 5 Blaze. An example of this is when Phoebe uses her heavy attack Star Flash. Inside her Confession stance, she adds 5 stacks of Spectral Frazzle, which will be 25 Blaze. Zani can hold a maximum of 100 Blaze, which makes Phoebe a solid choice since she can apply 19 stacks of Spectral Frazzle or 95 Blaze herself. With that being said, we can now get into Zani's Liberation and Forte circuit. After casting Zani's Liberation, she will enter Inferno mode, and now be able to consume Blaze to increase her multipliers based on how much Blaze she consumes. She also gains 50 Blaze instantly and goes from 100 Blaze to 150. Inside this mode, she will be able to do enhanced basics and skills that will scale with your Forte circuit level and are considered heavy and Spectral Frazzle damage. Her new basic attack sequence is called Daybreak, Dawning, and Nightfall. You can also do a skill counter to now perform Light Smash that does very high damage, consumes Blaze, does relatively high vibration damage, and allows you to cast Nightfall afterwards. You can actually quick swap her very long ability Nightfall and generate stacks of Blaze that will extend your Liberation duration. This will be utilized more with Rover since Phoebe has a very long cooldown for her Confession stance, but this can help close the gap a little bit between their supportive capabilities. After burning through your Blaze and going below 30, which you can see the indicator line here, you can use your Liberation a second time. This actually has a pretty high multiplier, but does scale with Liberation damage instead of heavy damage. This also ends your Inferno mode. As for Zani's outro, this consumes all of the stacks of Heliacal Ember you've inflicted on enemies through your Spectral Frazzle characters, including Zani, and does damage that scales with how many stacks the enemies have on them. You also get a Spectral Damage amplification for your next rotation, but the enemy does need to have Heliacal Ember inflicted, helping characters like Spectral Rover a bit since they can immediately reapply Heliacal Embers to get that Spectral Frazzle damage amplification. The last part of her kit is going to be her intro, which does do decent damage but generates a ton of Forte energy to help Zani get her enhanced skill off more quickly. It also does give 12% spectral damage bonus for 14 seconds with an inherent skill. Zani's rotation can vary quite a bit depending on the situation, but there is a solid standard rotation that you can use to maximize her damage. You're going to want to intro attack and immediately cast your resonant skill, then use your basic attack, which will skip to basic 3. This will be enough to have your Forte gauge maxed to cast your enhanced skill Targeted Action. Next, cast Targeted Action and make sure you perform its last hit, since this ability adds Blaze on your last hit. It also gives Zani a 20% spectral frazzle damage amplification, so you want to make sure you do this before you use your liberation. Now cast your Resonance Liberation, which will put you in Inferno mode, increase all your basic attack multipliers by 25%, and allow you to start casting your basic attack chain that's called Daybreak, Dawning, and Nightfall. After doing 2 rotations of this combo, you will now have low enough blaze to cast your Liberation again and outro. Of course, there are variations to this rotation, like utilizing your hold skill to do counterattacks and reduce the enemy's vibration, but will definitely rely on specific enemies and gameplay. In case you missed my last video where I went over how to build her echoes, here's a brief summary of what you've missed. Eternal Radiance will be her best set, and making sure you use Capitanius as your main echo will provide you a moderate damage boost over using Nightmare Morning Ikes, although make sure to include Nightmare Morning Ikes as a part of your set. As for what main stat to go for, going for crit damage will be optimal if you have mid to high crit rate rolls, as she does get 20% crit rate from Eternal Radiance, and has 8% crit rate in her nodes. You also get an additional 12.5 crit rate from a built Shorekeeper. Crit rate can be about as good in some builds, just be careful not to overcap your crit rate too much. Double Spectro damage 3 cost will be slightly better than running 1 attack percent 3 cost. In terms of echo rolls, you're going to want to prioritize crit rate and crit damage, followed by attack percent, then heavy attack damage bonus. I also find that in some teams she requires a bit more energy, so going for energy recharge as the last substat will be optimal. As far as talents go, you're going to want to level your Forte, as this provides you with the majority of your damage. With the pretty decent gap between, you're going to want to level your Resonance Liberation next. Leveling your Resonance skill will give you a bit more damage since you will need to cast it to activate your Spectral Frazzle Amplify before using your Liberation, followed by your normal attack and then intro. Since we'll now be getting into comparisons, I'll note that the echo values in these calculations are max rolls with the character's preferred stats, and provide damage bonus and attack percent to avoid unequal stat saturation. Blazing Justice is quite a bit better than the other options, giving a massive 50% Spectral Frazzle damage amplification and an 8% defense shred at R1. The only real downside to this weapon is that she's the only one that can fully utilize this weapon, and it will likely stay that way, which is why I believe they made it so strong. Tragic Comedy is a solid second option, providing heavy attack damage bonus that Zani will trigger throughout her rotation anyways. The only real downside to this weapon is the crit rate substat, since it's so easy to overcap Zani's crit rate due to Eternal Radiance giving 20%, her having crit rate nodes, and her best teammate being Shorekeeper giving another 12.5%. Even with my Zani who is built well but has room to grow would overcap in a Shorekeeper team by about 11.8% crit rate if I ran Tragic Comedy. If I had Sequence 2, it would make me overcap by 31.8% crit rate, which would be far from ideal. This is why my calculations favor Blazing Justice so heavily, since they are done considering perfect echoes. In this situation with perfect echoes, Blazing Justice will give Zani about a 24% damage increase over Tragic Comedy, or a 21% team-wide damage increase for their first rotation. Since I wanted to include a more relatable build, I put my own echoes in and ran the calculations as shown here. Blazing Justice in my account gives about a 15% Zani damage increase and a 13% team DPS increase over Tragic Comedy, closing the gap quite a bit since I get more value out of the crit rate. Verity's Handle will be a decent option as well, since the all damage bonus is utilized, giving it the third best option if you have it. The Liberation damage bonus isn't totally wasted either. Upgrading this weapon to Blazing Justice will provide about a 37% damage increase in a perfect echo scenario for Zani's personal damage. And for the team DPS, it's going to be about a 33% damage increase. Although Abyss Surges doesn't have any crit, it's a decent weapon if you don't have any of the limited 5-star options. Getting Blazing Justice will provide about a 50% damage increase for Zani in this scenario, or a 43% team damage increase. If you don't have any 5-star alternative, you can consider using Stonard if you purchase the Battle Pass. In this test, this weapon suffers from having a crit rate substat, just like Tragic Comedy and Verity's Handle, but will likely give you more value if you're not running Shorekeeper or have lower crit rate rolls on your echoes. Blazing Justice will give Zani about a 71% damage increase in this scenario, or a 60% team DPS increase. As for Legend of Drunken Hero, I went to test this weapon after clearing Tower of Adversity with it, and realized I should test to see if its passive even works, since I wasn't sure if Heliacal Embers counted as a negative status. Unfortunately, after testing, I realized its passive does not work. This could be a bug, but we'll have to wait and see if Kuro wants to make changes to it. Now, if it does work and I'm just losing my mind, at R5 it's going to be almost as good as Abyss Surges at R1. If not, you're going to be much better off going for Abyss Surges. Zani's team options are quite limited, but team building is relatively simple. Shorekeeper, Phoebe, and Zani is definitely going to generate the highest DPS for Zani, granting her a ton of crit and damage amplification. As for a more free-to-play friendly team, you can try out Rover, Mortefi, and Zani. I'm doing a showcase at the end of this video for both sides of Tower to showcase this. Although I was definitely playing suboptimally in these runs, so she definitely can perform better than shown here. Based on the current in-game data we have for Chacona, she will probably not work nearly as well as Phoebe or Rover, since Rover does have some Spectral Res Shred, and when reading Chacona's kit, she seems to favor Arrow and Arrow Erosion teams more than Spectral Frazzle. Although she does apply Spectral Frazzle, this is likely having to do with making her an able Arrow Rover so they can convert Spectral Frazzle to Arrow Erosion and proc the Gust of Welkin buff. If you have Phoebe but don't have Shorekeeper, Spectral Rover can actually perform quite well as a healer for this team. As for Rover as the Spectral Frazzle generator, while I covered this in my last video, Zani has had some changes since then, and I managed to fine-tune the character's rotations. Phoebe with her signature weapon gives Zani about a 53% damage increase or a 44% team-wide DPS increase over Rover in the first rotation due to the last-minute changes Kuro made, allowing Zani's Forte skill to scale with Spectral Frazzle. I also calculate Zani to be quite a bit stronger, since the previous rotation I had was with her doing a basic attack sequence all the way through to generate enough Forte energy to cast her Forte skill. And now for my conclusion. While Zani's team options are rather restrictive, she does have a free-to-play option in Rover, but will require you to make the most out of your rotations to maximize the team's damage. Although it's not talked about enough, having a low cooldown counter mechanic makes her in my opinion one of the most fun characters I've ever played in a gacha game. If you're willing to invest into her tools, she can perform slightly better than Carlotta's signature S0R1 team with similar investment, and while not being ranged, does provide versatility by being powerful in all current endgame content, of course outside of the highly spectral resistant or frequently mobile enemies. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe, as I will be making a pre-release guide for Chacona soon. And as stated earlier, here are my tower clears with a Rover, Mortefi, and Zani team, with the non-functional 4-star Legend of Drunken Hero. The runs can definitely be optimized to get a better performance, like quick swapping Zani's Nightfalls, and getting the full effect out of Zani's Forte skill more consistently. These runs were both completed at the 3-minute mark, so if you're willing to watch a couple of nail biters, please enjoy.